Hey guys, week 2, muscle up. The infamous muscle up. We've got T-Money on the camera back here today because I'm going to be shooting from a couple of different angles. We'll be doing some low ring muscle up work, we're doing some high ring muscle up work, we're doing some box work. So a couple of different implements we're shooting today. Number 1, keep practicing your strict muscle up, okay? If you don't have the strict pull up and the strict ring dip, keep practicing those prereqs so that we can get the strict muscle up. Ultimately, we want to be able to do everything strict as well as kipping, okay? So don't stop practicing those things. But how do we get better at doing lots of them? We got to add a kip, right? That core to extremity power generation that we're always looking to get out of most of the things that we do during class, okay? So I'm going to show you how to do a kipping low ring muscle up. Then I'm going to show you a couple of drills to get better at the kipping low ring muscle up. And then I'll show you a drill on the high rings where we're just doing a kipping drill, but our feet are off the ground now, okay? First things first is that grip, okay? Come on in so you can see this real tight. That false grip that we used last week, this is also very important here on the low ring kipping muscle up, okay? Remember, the false grip is a pulling and a pushing grip, okay? The only thing that changes is the position of the wrist. Stay up there, strap. Is the position of the wrist in relation to the ring when we're either pulling or pushing, but the hand or the grip on the ring actually stays the same place, in the same position, okay? So make sure you got that false grip. All right, feet again are starting underneath the rings so that our toes are directly underneath whatever implement that we're on. Okay, we're gonna lay back just like we did last week for our strict ring muscle up, only now we're gonna lower our butt, okay? We're gonna lower our butt and our feet are gonna be flat. So remember last week, we were here, we were working on that pull, right? That straight up pull and getting to use our feet to press up. Today we're back with our heels down and our butt down, okay? You can even start in a seated position if you want, right? And what we're working on here is driving our hips up to the rings, right? Hips up to the rings. What that looks a lot like is that pressing of the feet and the pulling in here, only we're generating more power with our hips, right? So you can live right there for a little bit, okay? Just driving your hips up, trying to touch your hips to the rings. If you can get to a point where you can drive your hips up and you almost feel weightless, like your feet come off the ground for a second, then you're probably generating enough power to get actually through the rings on top, okay? The next step though, keeping the feet on the ground, not letting them actually leave the ground, is to sit through, right? So we're here, we're driving our hips up nice and strong. Okay, we're pulling the rings in tight. To get through, all we have to do is remember those thumbs, trace the rib cage or trace the pecs as we come through, okay? Notice my feet didn't leave the ground, ever, okay? They stayed on the ground the whole time. This is the starting kipping low ring muscle up drill. Eventually, we're trying to get to a point where we can kip into that ring dip and have our feet off the ground, right? But that's not the first step. The first step is keeping your feet on the ground, kipping through, catching into that ring dip, and if you want to press it out or jump and press it out, do it, but be careful not to jump through into a press out position, right? We've got to hit that low dip or that ring, the bottom of that ring dip position before we press it out, right? So I'll do 2, and so you can see what I'm talking about. Notice my feet stay on the ground and I hit all my positions, okay? Alright, so big hip explosion towards the rings, fast sit up into a bottom of the ring dip, and then the press out, okay? If this gets easy, okay, you're generating a lot of power through your hips, you feel like you can try it with your feet off the ground. The portion of this drill where your feet leave the ground is the sit-up, okay? Not the jump, but the sit-up. So after you've driven your hips up as high as you can quickly, you start to sit through the rings. You're going to pull your knees into your chest, okay? And I'll show you what that looks like now. I'll do 2 of them. Okay? So it might be hard to tell, but as I sat through those rings, my feet came off the ground, my knees came into my chest. Essentially, you're doing a muscle up or a kipping muscle up on the low rings there, okay? That's a tough drill. We're working to get there. That's what that looks like. That's how we practice the kipping muscle up on the high rings, making it easier so that we don't keep failing in the same positions, okay? All right, how do we practice the hip drive and the sit-up, okay? The two parts that are so crucial for this. Two things. One, we gotta work on hip extension, okay? So we do a drill on the floor. It's very simple. We lay on our back. Feet are flat on the ground. Hands are flat on the ground as well. We're going to tuck our knees into our chest and roll up to our shoulders, okay? That's our starting position. From there, what we're trying to do is mimic that big violent hip extension. So I want you to imagine there's a fence line in front of your body, or an electric fence, if you will, that runs right in front of your body, and you have to kick up and over that fence. It looks like this. And then back down, okay? If you kick too high, you'll feel this big sinking and drop sensation, okay? Think about kicking up and down, right? When you kick down, be active, right? Up and over. We're kicking up and over that fence. Land flat-footed as well, okay? One more time. Okay? I'll show you what one looks like when that's done incorrectly. Alright, see that big fall, that sinking, that dropping? That's bad, right? We want to be active up and down. That's what gets us to go vertical, okay? And then the second one, the sit-up and the muscle up, and this is the tricky one. You're going to need some boxes, and you can do this with boxes that are just down on the ground like this. Okay, and this should be a little easier. Your feet will be on the ground, or you can do them with two boxes stacked on top of each other, and this will allow you to pick your feet up off the ground, okay? Now again, this is the more advanced of the two. All you have to do to make this easier is use two boxes instead of four boxes and lower it, keep your feet on the ground, right? But it starts with your thumbs off the box and your hands flat, right? Resting on your elbows, and what we're trying to do here is pick our feet up. If you can see that, can you see my feet coming off the ground? Okay, pick your feet up off the ground, and then sit up or sit forward into this deep, deep dip position, okay? And if you can do this with your feet off the ground, then we can do it over there with our feet off the ground more than likely, okay? It looks like this. I'm gonna do 2 reps, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. Okay. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but on both of those, I got myself to support, which is right here, and then I rocked back to load a little bit, load that shoulder, and then as I sat through, my eyes went to the floor, okay? Where most people miss their muscle up is on the sit-up, they get to vertical, they get to 90 degrees, their head in line with the straps, and they want to stop. You've got to go through those straps into this deep dip position, okay? Which is why I talked about over here, not going from a hip drive into a dip or a support position on the rings, because you have to get used to that fast sit up, which essentially would put your body in front of the rings, okay? This is a fantastic drill if you feel like you can get to here in the muscle up every single time, but you're just not getting through, okay? This is a great drill for you. So those are our 2 drills to get better at the kip and the sit-up on the muscle up, whether it be low ring or high ring, okay? The last thing you can do is practice the kip just like you would a kipping pull-up on the high rings, and I'll show you that here in a minute. We'll go more in depth next week on it, but in the meantime, if these become easy, you can catch yourself off the ground with your knees up tucked into your chest, and these 2 drills have become easy for you. You can start to practice this kip, okay? And it's just a simple kip, just like a regular bar kip for a pull-up. It starts small with a big extension and a loading of the shoulder and the hip, and then you're snapping your hips to the rings, okay? If you notice, I wasn't pulling on those rings with my arms. I was pulling those rings down to my hips with my shoulder, right? I led with my knee, and I snapped my hip, and I lowered those rings to my hips the entire time, right? I wasn't pulling them to my chest. Just a preview into next week. We'll get more in depth into that next week. Practice the kipping, lowering muscle up. Practice the over-the-fence hip extension drill. Practice your box sit-ups. All these things are crucial foundational movements for the muscle up. See you next week.